Welcome, everybody, to the Soul of the Unexplained. I am your host, Jim, and joining me today is a bunch of very special folks here that I'm happy to have as one of them is my co-host because unfortunately Roger is unable to join us. He's feeling a little under the weather, so definitely send my best wishes out to Roger for a swift recovery. But stepping in for Roger today is my very dear friend and fellow Skinwalker Ranch Insider and my favorite Denver Broncos fan, Mr. John Neiberger. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me. I feel bad for Roger. I wish he could be here, but I don't know if I'm the co-host. Deputy assistant co-host, maybe.
And joining us as our special guest is that gentleman that you just saw there on the screen, Mr. Kaleb Bench of Skinwalker Ranch, the security team at Skinwalker Ranch. Kaleb, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, awesome. Always a pleasure to have you on. This is what, Kaleb, like your third time, I think, here on the Soul
Yeah, I
of the
think
Unexplained.
yeah, third or fourth, yeah.
Right on. And I see you rocking the gaming headset. That's awesome.
Yeah, I figured I'd make it a little bit easier on maybe audio and being able to hear some if there's some issues. So
Fantastic. Well, today, folks, we're gonna kind of recap the most recent episode of the History Channel's docuseries, "The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch." And as we do so, we're gonna get Kaleb's perspectives because, well, he was there, right? So, Kaleb, this to begin with, this season in particular of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch has really been amazing. And I know I say that for every season that has aired thus far, but in particular, season
yeah,
five has really been something special. And there just appears to be a greater focus all around from the team. Like you guys just hit the ground running, and the pace just hasn't let up since then. How does it feel for you? Does it feel that the way things have unfolded over this particular season that it kind of had that greater focus and pace picking up on it?
yeah, we definitely had a lot to build off of, and it's that's been one of the very fun parts of this is seeing how the overall investigation has moved forward and evolved over the years. And yeah, this last year we definitely had a lot more moving parts, and we definitely did a lot of big experiments, and you guys have seen some of those. Um, and just the level of technology that we've been able to bring to the table through the guests, like Pete Kelsey and Jan Frank, and the professionalism and the just the level of expertise in the third party experts that we've brought out. And yeah, last year and what you guys are seeing being released currently is is it has been truly phenomenal in the results that we recorded live, and those who are listening to this who have watched the season and are keeping up with everything. Obviously, this last episode that just released on, I believe, the 26th, showed two of the more really I don't know what words to use, outside of extraordinary and fantastical, really. And then the one in particular is actually very disturbing. Um, and again, it's really something that both of those things happen in broad daylight. And yeah, there was, how do you make that up?
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I mean, if what we were looking at that happened with that calf was like massive exposure to microwaves, it kind of my limited understanding of the whole subject is that I'd be concerned that maybe the exposure could have been slow cooking you guys out there as well.
Oh yeah.
I mean that's just kind of one of the perils that a lot of people may not take into consideration that you and the team face when you're out there in
Mhm.
situations like that, right?
Yeah, and let's if we can dive right into that topic with the calf is when you really look at it, we were extremely close, relatively speaking.
Right.
Um, I where we were set up with all our equipment and all our antennas and everything, we were no more than 75 to 100 feet from where that calf was. And you see what happens in the show is it starts spinning in circles. And I brought it to the attention of the guys, and I walked out and stood right next to the fence. And at that point, I was no more than 30, 40 feet from it, if not a little bit closer. And at where I was standing, I definitely didn't feel anything. But as it was spinning in circles, I was extremely close to it. So, there's a lot of questions that could be asked in regards to that. Was this obviously this is very localized? But all the other cows, usually when an animal is in distress, a lot of them usually try to come over and a lot of times they'll come and see what's going on. They're curious just like anybody else.
Right.
Um, or just like any other living creature, I guess. And none of them were coming near it, even the mom. And a lot of times in herd animals like that, the mom's at least going to try and come and try and protect the baby if they can.
Yeah.
Um, and that was one of the really peculiar things is not a even the mother would not come in through into the space where that calf was being I don't know. I hate to use the word
Yeah. And
targeted, but
that's what it seemed like. And
yeah.
you you grew up, correct me if I'm wrong, on in like a ranch type setting, and I grew up in a rural part of New York where there were a lot of dairy farms, and so
Hmm.
I'm familiar with a lot of animal behavior of cows and cattle. Um, and it's not normal when, particularly when a calf is in distress, like you said, you would expect the herd to kind of rally around it, and particularly the mother
Yeah.
would be beside herself with anxiety. And at least the way it was shown, the way this episode was edited, I didn't see any of that. And for you to make that observation that that is in fact what played out, was that the mother kind of kept her space from the calf. That's
Hmm.
it seems targeted, almost like a,
Yeah.
for want of a better term, like a directed energy weapon of some
Yeah.
kind, right?
Yeah, and that's where we obviously don't have any actual proof that it is a directed energy weapon of any kind, but that's where when you look at all the other surrounding circumstances, it's very um interesting the timing, right?
Right.
Obviously we had if for those who don't know the situations, we're drilling into the mesa, um and trying to figure out what potentially some kind of object is in there or what's going on inside this mesa, especially since we've had a lot of interesting discoveries there with the ground penetrating radar and a lot of other information from other drilling exercises. And we start getting these different signals, and Travis mentions the one in particular is actually the same frequency that many long range listening devices operate off of.
Mm.
And they're the exact same kind of equipment that is used in if you're trying to gather intelligence on, particularly in uh, you know, I can't remember if it's special forces or anything like that, but if you're trying to gather information on someone, you know, that you're you're,
Right.
you're spying on essentially.
Right.
That's what this type of equipment uses in that frequency. Um, and we noticed that, and immediately that's where these cows, they were over in another area on the ranch, and we knew where they were. And once we picked that signal up, they started moving and came right by us as if they were trying to go to the other side. But just a lot of moving parts like that. And then obviously this is when that we had the incident with the calf. And um, as you guys saw, we they all scatter. They all ran actually back the other way after the calf got hit by whatever this was. And Tom and I had to go and round them up, and we had to push them all the way back across the ranch, which it was about a mile and a half, 2 mile, or yeah, about a mile from the command center.
Mhm.
You know, and then the ran and we called the ranchers, and they had to come out and help gather them up and all that stuff, and we were able to separate the calf and the mom from the rest of the herd. And yeah, there was quite a bit of a conversation with the veterinarian, and particularly about the calf. And what really stands out is when she like really got and dove in and was looking at the eyes, and you guys can see the damage that was done there live, and the hemorrhaging that was around the eyeball.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where, you know, one of the things that she actually initially told us was, um, at that time of the year with calves and younger animals, they do see quite a bit of eye injuries because the calves are putting their heads down. Not even just calves, but other the older animals too. That they put their heads down. There's all the weeds. There's all the vegetation that could scratch their eyes and stuff.
Right. Right.
And so she's not unused to eye injuries in cattle, and that's what she was kind of expecting. But then when she gets there, and because I can't remember who called her, if it was a part of the production team or if it was Tom or the rancher. I want to say it was actually the production team, and they asked if she could come out and help diagnose something that had happened with an animal. And I think they're usually very vague because it's the filming side. They still want the initial reactions. They still want that kind of information, you know, that kind of stuff to record.
Right.
And when she finally shows up and we're able to start having this conversation, you can see on her face where she's like, "What the crap?" It's completely surprised and concerned about what's going on. And um, I don't think they show this part in the conversation, but that one, essentially she does get to the point where she's like, "I'd be surprised if this animal lives." And probably the best thing would be to just put it down at this point. But then obviously that was still up to the rancher at that point, and he decided, well, let's try and see what we can do to maybe save it. The long-term decision, they removed it from the property that night, and yeah, the calf did recover, but it still lost its eyesight. And
I had never seen anything like that.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't even imagine what it
yeah.
must have been like in real time as it unfolded.
Oh, and yeah,
Yeah.
and you see that conversation, a lot of that conversation when we're sitting there with the calf in the chute, and we're looking at it and going, and she's like, yeah, she's clearly hemorrhaging in both eyes. She's
Right.
like, that's not the main thing here. That's indicative of some kind of damage to the brain. And that's what she was very concerned about, was especially as we were describing some of uh,
Behavior.
the behavior, thank you, of the calf.
Hmm.
So yeah, and you could see it all on our faces, like, what in the flip is going on out here?
Yeah.
And again, it was, I'm sure some people have heard, if they've been following the investigation and stuff, and especially in the insiders, I'm sure both of you have heard us say this over the last couple of weeks, but that was the one thing, that has really made us question if being out there is worth, um, being out there and being involved.
Worth
Just
the risk.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, because yeah, that's the thing, is could that have happened? That could have happened to anybody if it was really something nefarious, and that could be controlled. But this is like one of those things, thinking about it, where we were located on the ranch, you can't see that area even when you're in the surrounding area because of those trees
Hmm.
down in the base there. You can see on the mesa there, and maybe up closer to it, but down where the calf was and down where we kind of were, we're pretty sheltered from, I think, eyes outside of the ranch because of the trees.
Yeah.
Um, so where, if it was something, where's it coming from? It has to be coming from above us, is the only thing that I could think of or to explain it.
Same. I mean, again, not even being close to being an expert on any of these matters.
Yeah,
That's the only thing that would make sense to me would be something coming from above or, you know, perhaps at ground level. But again, where is it coming from? You know, and
yeah,
that's I can only imagine the additional layer of mystery that adds to the whole situation. And what a lot of people may not understand is that these cattle they do belong to is it Moon Shadow Ranch that Land, Glendon and I, I I think that's what I saw in the episode. But regardless of what the name of the ranch is, these cattle belong to the rancher, and
hmm,
they're an investment. They're not
yeah,
something that is easily written off. Not
no,
only is it a valuable life to begin with, but it's also something that rancher makes an investment in and
yep,
nurtures and grows, and so it's a bit of a tragedy all the way around for what we
yeah,
had to see happen, and we see this happen in so many other places. And of course, Skinwalker Ranch is no stranger to this phenomena of
hmm,
mutilation. And of course, the episode uh, earlier in this episode, you had the incident that occurred at Four Star Ranch where Jim
the Colt,
Morse went to talk to the rancher there about the colt. So these mutilations, when they happen, they're so bizarre, and he explained the same kind of thing. The mother just wanted nothing to do with the colt, and I know horses in particular, mama horses, they love their colts, and they just
yeah,
something has to be wrong on such a level that mother
yeah,
ignores all of her instincts, all of her genetic imprinting to make her abandon a colt, or in this case, the mother cow of the calf. So it
yeah,
just WTF, man, right?
yeah, yeah, and you're hitting on a good point. There is, um, it's been that's been one of the really enlightening things having been in law enforcement in the basin for the last couple of years is a lot of other officers have shared experiences and things that have happened. Like and right now uh, the sergeant that I work with at Roosevelt right now, his father was an officer in this area as well. And I had a couple opportunities to be able to speak with him about stuff, and he shared a lot of different stories about mutilations and things that he investigated himself. And then actually this week there was another officer. He's been in about 26, 27 years now. He's coming up on that time where he's ready to retire, but he was telling me when he was with Duchesne County about a case where he shows up and you could see straight down where this cow had been hit by whatever it was, and half the head was gone. And everything else was the remaining part was still perfect. Like if you looked at that cow from the side where the face was still intact, you
Wow.
you wouldn't you wouldn't be able to tell the damage on the other side because it was that that clean of a cut essentially. And you can see this the line of the skin, the tissue, and then the bone, and then the brain, all that stuff. And this is another thing is like when you think about this is I know this from personally dealing with this stuff or any hunter, there's always going to be some kind of residual tissue or some kind of blood or fluids, and things like that from any kind of damage that's done to a body.
Right.
Um, and that, again, like this has been stuff I've personally experienced as not just a hunter, but in law enforcement, I've had to put multiple animals down because they've been hit by cars or vehicles or something.
Hmm.
Um, and then obviously on top of that, I deal with a lot of human victims, and there's always a mess, depending on the situation.
Right.
Um, but and depending on the level of damage and things like that. Um, And that's what, again, is what sticks out on a lot of mutilations is the lack of the residual tissue and fluids. And then, and some, in some of these conversations with some of these officers, they're like, yeah, you never know later down the road when you wish you would have kept something. And, you look at some of those time periods, let's take that officer, for example, let's go back 26 years. That's what, the early or the late 90s. How many people had a cell phone in the late 90s that they could just whip out, take photos of it, be like, oh, that's cool, I'm going to save that.
Yeah.
Um, and just the capability that a lot of people are so used to now, but really that's only been the last 10 to 15 years capability.
Hmm. Yeah.
So when you go back to that time, yeah, you had some nice digital cameras, I think at that point, but the ability to save those in a good storage or something like that. And we've learned this too in other areas when it in regards to law enforcement is a lot of records are just gone now because they didn't get transferred over to the digital or the cloud or whatever the
Yep.
the storage system is at this point. And so if there is a record of them, if they weren't outright destroyed in the case of like a mutilation case or something, which a lot of officers from that time period will tell you, if they had something like that, they wouldn't be recognized as an official record by someone in the administration, and they'd be like, get rid of it.
Hmm.
And so if it wasn't just outright destroyed in paper shredder or something, or if the officer was like, oh, well, I think this is important, and took it home, who knows where it's at now, kind of thing. Um, that's another experience I have with an individual out here whose father was an officer, and he talked about how every time his dad would respond to one of those types of cases, he was basically told to get rid of it, and but his dad would come home and put it in its own little file with all the other ones, and he's like, I wish I could find that, but that was 20, 30 years ago. So
Yeah.
who knows?
That's kind of what this whole greater topic is still fighting against. It's a stigma that's
Yeah,
still out there. And I would imagine that stigma goes a lot deeper than just say law enforcement, but how many ranchers are afraid of, coming forward
yeah,
with something like this for fear of, what attention it may draw to them.
yeah,
So it's it's a difficult thing. I mean, it's difficult to gain any traction on figuring out because it to begin with, it's so bizarre. I mean, how is it that these animals get exsanguinated and relieved of all body fluids? And like you were saying, Caleb, I hunted a lot with my dad when I was younger, and I helped him field dress a lot of deer. And we're talking a deer is a lot smaller than your average, head of cattle.
yeah,
And so you get a lot of blood and guts and mess when you field dress a deer. I can't even imagine what it's like for a cow. And yet, one of the trademark consistencies in these mutilation cases is the absence of any kind of blood, the
yeah,
absence of things like footprints, tire tracks,
yep,
something that would provide a more mundane, rational explanation doesn't seem to fit, right? I mean, it's like you're
yeah,
you're you're essentially left with really extreme possibilities. Number one, it's man doing this, some super secret private enterprise of some kind that have figured out how to surreptitiously do all this to remove the cattle, take it someplace, bring it back uh, after doing all these things to it without ever being detected.
yeah,
Or the other extreme is when you start getting into the woo factor, the ETs, extraterrestrials, interdimensional, something that can take that cow out of time, out of dimension, and do whatever it does in some other place or time, and then bring it back to wherever it was taken from. And whichever one of those it may be, or something in between that we haven't even thought of, it just It's one of those things that just boggles the mind, right?
Yeah, and as you're talking about that, I can't help but think, yeah, we've heard a lot of these stories, and one of those stories that has been passed down in particular of Skinwalker Ranch is um, there was the story or the claim that the rancher was out in the field, and I'm actually kind of interested to know which field it was now at this point.
Right.
That he was out middle of the daylight and had cattle around, and he was actually checking calves. I'm assuming it was around calving season,
Packing,
and
yeah.
he had just checked on a particular set, and with the mom and the calf goes off, and he's no more than 100, 200 yards away from where he just was checking on this particular set, and here's the one of the cows going crazy, essentially, probably very familiar to what we witnessed, runs back over and finds that the calf has been completely mutilated. And I don't know the level of the mutilation. I can't remember if that details out there, but say it's one of the kind of normal, if you will, if considering the situation,
Yeah.
um, like say its eyes are missing, or some of the sexual organs, is that's one of the things that's usually missing too, or any other of the body parts. But let's think about that for a second, where this rancher's out in the middle of his field, and less than a couple 100 feet from him this mutilation takes place, and he only hears something and runs over and finds this, right?
Right.
That's so crazy. But and yet let's look at what, again, we caught live with our cameras in the television show. We're out there standing, not even really notice, the cows really weren't the focus, and no more than 75 feet from us this cow is damaged by something.
Right.
And so, I can't help but wonder if like there's a lack of fluid, because like we were seeing, it was getting hit potentially or theoretically by some kind of microwave energy, or something like that. And from my understanding and from what I've been told, I was talking with Eric and Travis and the vet, and um, that essentially could boil. Like, think about what microwaving does to, when you
Yeah.
put something in a microwave. What's it usually do to the, if it's in there long enough,
Well,
it
let's think back to what is
it
it,
it
the film Gremlins, when they stick the gremlin
yeah.
inside the microwave. I mean, it blows up from the inside, right?
Yeah,
That's what it does.
it essentially dehydrates the
Exactly.
whatever it is. So
Mhm.
so I'm not saying we did, but just think about that for a second. Did we potentially witness the start of what happens to these animals?
Right.
Hmm. By the way, there is video of that cow. What you were just talking about, that story that
Mm-hmm.
happened back in the NIDS days,
Yes.
and they got video of it. It's online. It's on YouTube somewhere. I've seen it
Mm.
before. Yep. And it is. It's exactly how you described. There's this mutilated cow,
Mm-hmm.
but no other signs.
Yeah.
Like on the one hand, it's kind of frustrating that more investigation doesn't happen. But how do you investigate it? There's no evidence other than the carcass. There's never anything else. What do you do with that?
Yeah, and this is you're hitting one of the great questions that we're always facing on the ranch, is how do we investigate what we're what we're looking for? Half the time we feel like we don't even know what we're looking for anymore.
Yep.
Um, and that's, yeah, I'm so happy you said that.
Well, I like to say it often on this show. Usually, it's like usually regarding the ranch or something that happened is like that can't happen, but it just happened, you know. And this is kind
Yeah,
of like that. A cow in the middle of a field, mere feet from other people, potentially gets microwaved so bad that its eyes rupture. No one
yeah,
else feels a thing. Powerful directed microwaves don't just appear in a field. That can't
yeah,
happen.
Right.
But something like that clearly just happened. So
yes,
what the heck do you do with that?
Yeah, a good point to note here too is I I'm pretty sure in the show they kind of mentioned this. We had different equipment that theoretically is what's we're using to potentially pick this kind of activity up.
Right.
The tri-field
Tri-field
meters,
meters, yeah.
the oh my gosh, the spectrum analyzers, different dosimeters, different things like that. Nothing went off. So if it doesn't set equipment off that's designed to pick up whatever potentially is out there, then what is it? Or how does it block or um, how does the equipment not pick it up?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's where it can start getting a little bit more on the concerning side if there's things that can spoof or it's some kind of technology we have no idea how it works and we can't detect it.
Well, it's
Yeah.
almost like a
It's
maser. There's a laser is light directed. Maser is
precisely.
Yeah,
It's
microwave
microwave,
directed.
yeah.
yeah,
So if that's happening over there and it's a beam and you have a detector over yonder,
yeah,
it will pick it up.
yeah.
'Cause
And yeah, and it's one of those things where um just think about what that could imply.
it kind of scares me what that implies because there's a
Right?
few different things and they're all bad.
Yes. Well,
None
and
of them are good.
no, well, and that's again one of the conversations that is ongoing generally when we are all together on the ranch is um, if this is potentially, say, a near peer or human sourced,
Right.
who has that technology, who has that kind of backing, who has that level, and if they do, who are they? And that's I'm more scared of that possibility than it being,
Exactly. To that end, you almost hope it is one of the more extraordinary and outlandish things as an ET or an interdimensional, as opposed to being
yeah,
a peer or foreign adversary type of technology being used.
yeah,
That's
Even
particularly
worse,
ominous. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
even more ominous. What about this? I almost hate to even suggest this, but it just occurred to me while we were talking because you tie that kind of stuff in with all the other obvious surveillance with the
yeah.
radio
Well, if
surveillance.
it's our own, yeah,
What if it's our own people
yeah,
messing with you guys because they know you're out there investigating this weird stuff and they're
yeah,
testing stuff out there, watching to see how you react to it? That had
yeah,
never occurred to me before until this chat. And
yeah,
that's even more scary to me if something
yeah,
like that's happening.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because and that's where
It
um
kind of
I've
drives home
been,
some of the things that Chris Bartel has talked about in some of his experiences,
yep,
with stuff like that. It's a real thing.
yeah, and that's again is I there are conversations that I've been privy to and have part, uh, been a participant in where we've had individuals who have been a part of certain organizations, or if you will, and this is where I try to tread lightly because it, they happened off camera, they happened off,
Hmm.
more personal space, and I don't want to get anyone in trouble or anything like that, obviously, but there's been some conversations that have really been like, what the heck? And I know that's like a major like teaser kind of thing, and
Right.
but again, it's there's a lot of you know uh, personal trust there that's been placed in me in some of this, and yeah, and that's where I've said before is at the end of the day when the truth always comes out,
Always.
and that's where it's like I hope that we're able to as a team in regards to some of that leave good breadcrumbs to where people go back and go, oh my gosh, like, and we're trying to show people and we're trying to talk about things, but we're also trying to be smart about this. you know, and then again with the show, we're not going to withhold anything that is filmed and that we catch. Like I was actually so happy with how this last episode was played, because that was one of the big concerns was, are they really going to show what happened to that calf and actually show it in the proper context?
Yeah.
And they did a phenomenal job of doing so. And I'm very happy and proud of the production company doing that.
Yeah, I really, as a fan and as a spectator, I really can't complain about what I see Prometheus putting together. And there's a lot of people that were justifiably upset at watching what happened to the calf, and it's
Yeah.
understandable. But yeah, I mean, particularly with what you're telling us now, I mean, another tip of the hat to Prometheus for doing exactly what Brandon set out to do with the show, which is to
Hmm.
show it everything as it unfolds, unscripted. Just there you go. And so
Hmm.
to hear you say that they edited that in a good way just makes me feel
Hmm.
more
Yeah,
proud
because
of what you're proud of, if
yeah,
that makes
and
sense.
yeah, and it's because like we've seen this, and not just in some circumstances with our own show, but when you really look in some other areas, obviously there's a lot of things that have happened in a lot of reality television shows that aren't exactly reality, and
Exactly.
that's no secret.
Right.
And when it comes to some of this stuff, there's other considerations. Like if something happens to an animal, everybody jokes, "Oh, great, PETA's coming," kind of thing.
Right.
And that's where I'm like, great, let them show up. They're not going to get, especially out in this area. And
Right.
and and that's where like with the calves, or with the ranchers and stuff out here. Again, they're like the rancher. I'm pretty sure he's mentioned this before. We don't want to see animals get hurt by any means,
No.
but I would still rather see 100 cows get hit by something like that than a single person.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and the rancher too. That's a part of ranching is you're going to lose livestock. You're going to have those things. You're not ever going to have 100% of your calves or your baby goats or whatever, or your baby chickens or whatever.
Yeah.
There's always going to be losses, and no one enjoys that.
Right.
And that's where it's like you look at these ranchers, they're under so much pressure, and they love what they're doing. They love those cows, they really do. But
Yeah.
it's real life, like and that's what I think a lot of people have, especially in today's society, has forgotten what reality is, or don't really know it.
It's
But
forgive me, it's the Disneyfication.
yeah,
Everything has been glossed over that,
yeah,
and that's not to say, I mean, I'm very much a lover of animals, and like you were saying, whether you're raising bunnies or whether
yeah,
you're raising cattle, you're going to lose some to sickness, to predators. I mean,
yeah,
it's just an inherent, risk of raising animals. And heck, same thing happens when you're gardening. I mean,
yeah,
I plant 20 tomato plants, and it's no guarantee that all 20 of them are going to yield, right?
yeah.
So it's what ranchers and farmers have to, it's part of
Hmm.
their life. It's part of what they do. And a lot of people, I think, either have never been fully aware of that's just what it's like in real life to these particular fields of ranching and raising cattle, or they just have been
Yeah.
oblivious to it. And
Well, and that's the other thing too is, and what I was getting at too is when in this realm, they don't the television shows and the production companies shows and the networks, they don't want undue attention because people think that they're trying to be negligent towards animals or people or things like that.
right.
And so those are the behind the scene kind of conversations that do happen, and that's where again I was like, we were really happy. And I think one of the things was is there's no way we could have ever controlled that.
Right.
There was no way in 1,000 years any of us thought that was going to happen.
Right. Well,
You can't predict that.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you predict that? You can't control that by any means.
Nope.
It recalls to me, who was it? John Alexander that said something to the effect of, you think you're in control at the ranch, but you're not.
Yeah.
You know, and
I don't know if he said that, but yeah, that is
yeah,
a very accurate statement.
Well, and yeah, those cows are clearly well cared for. And
Yeah.
even Thomas said, what was it, like half an hour before he'd been,
Oh, that was Bryant. Yeah.
or Bryant said, working with that cow, trying to get it back where, and he had seen it, he'd seen that calf, and it was
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, again, this is where the editing magic comes in, is they actually show when Bryant walks over to deal with the animals, and that was a good 30 to 40 minutes before the incident with the calf.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously with television and the time constriction on that, you're missing some information there,
Right.
which is fine. I get what they have to do. But yeah, Bryant was like that. Wait a minute, because when you look at that calf, it has a very unique pattern of black and brown. And a lot of those calves out there were either a very generic brown coloration or black generation. Very few of them have that kind of like a brindle, I guess you might call it.
yeah.
So it's a very noticeable calf or cow with its coloration, which is kind of sad because it's so unique and it's and then it's the one that gets hit
Like you
that.
said,
So,
how would you can't predict that. That's such a weird thing to happen.
yeah.
That even if someone were to claim, oh, it's a TV show, you're hurting that cow. No, this is not normal.
No.
I grew up around cows. One of my brothers still owns cows. As soon as I saw that cow spinning, I had a pit in my stomach because I was like,
Yeah.
that is not something that happens to cow. That's weird. That's way out of the ordinary. And then
Yeah.
when I saw the whites of its eyes, or its eyes were
yeah.
white, yeah, I felt sick. But
Oh
just
yeah.
Everyone watching knows this is not one of the normal things that you would expect to happen to a cow. This is something unusual.
Yeah. Oh, extremely, and so far beyond what anybody would have expected. And that's again where it is the fascinating and really extraordinary part of being a part of what's going on out there, is catching stuff like this and seeing that live and being there. Again, I was no more than 30 feet from that thing as it was still spinning in circles out.
I say
And
this jokingly, but do you guys have like hats with aluminum lining or something that you can quickly put? Do you like have immersion?
Faraday hats?
We've actually had that conversation multiple times because Travis knows of a company that creates clothing like that, and we've been going, do we need to invest in that entire kind of wardrobe?
It might not be a bad idea.
Probably not, especially after that. And that, trust me, there were conversations about that in regards to the cow and us afterwards. So yeah, it's definitely been something talked about for sure.
Yeah. And I just have to say, folks, if anybody happened to catch, my neighbors are shooting off fireworks, so I promise I'm not in the middle of a gangland. There's not like a drive-by going on outside my house.
Mine are doing the same thing behind me. I was wondering if you guys could hear that too.
We're less than a week away from the 4th of July, and in the state of Utah, you can set off fireworks 1 week before the 4th of July and a couple days after. So I've got some neighbors that are feeling patriotic tonight.
Yeah,
They're
there you
all
go.
illegal where I am. They're all illegal. No one cares.
Right on. Well, gosh, that was an awesome conversation about the cattle mutilation. Let's move on to the rocket. That was the other kind of big wow moment of the episode. So you guys detect this signal going on over by Homestead too. So you and Travis head out there, and Travis puts the detector thingy up toward the sky, and of course we know what happens next. Let's fire a rocket up at that bitch,
Yep.
right? So
Pretty
call
much.
Dragon, and Dragon brings out the rockets, and you fire one up, and goes straight up, comes back down, and then you fire up another one, and that for me, I mean, I honestly didn't think that I had
Yep.
any more of these jaw-dropping moments that I was going to be able to top or come close to topping the cone thing.
Oh,
But
just wait.
And the
Still.
lasers. Yeah.
yeah, and what I saw with that rocket was really like, holy crap.
Oh, that was the part that was very cool
Yeah,
because yeah, and it's again, it's only episode 9, guys. We still got like 5 more episodes.
right.
Um, but yeah, that rocket, I don't know what to do that. And we've had some conversations the last couple nights. I know you guys, I'm sure were a part of the insider chat last night, and yeah, we've beat to death the like a thermal barrier or something like that that the rocket may have ran into. And Travis has actually mentioned that he's seen rockets that have hit those, and they still move. They still are descending at a point. But yeah, this it literally looks like something grabbed the top of that rocket, kept it
Yeah.
in place without interrupting the parachute itself.
And so my question to you, Caleb, is from what we've seen of the ranch, at least over the last 4 seasons, there
Yeah,
is clearly some kind of intelligence there at the ranch. And so, do you honestly think that if it didn't want to show you something, that simply wouldn't have happened? I think it was almost like it wanted to show something to you, like, hey, watch this, let's see what they think of this.
the major possibility. Yeah, it, at this point, I am open to any kind of suggestion of why that rocket did that.
Right.
That makes as much sense as anything else at this point.
Well, it's kind of like
And
the guys said back when they were there. They're like, you're doing an experiment to check one thing, and some other weird thing happens. You're like, what
oh,
the hell?
that that has been such the running theme when you really go back and look at all these things. And one of the main conversations is in regards to that is like the telescope experiment from season 3.
Right.
We were going out there to look for some kind of optical um, thing that we might be able to see with the telescopes. Well, none of the telescopes worked, especially when they were pointed at the area of the triangle, and we end up seeing all this other stuff happen that completely distracts us away from the main experiment.
Yeah.
And that leads us going, oh crap, now we got to go look into that more.
That was
And
one of my best moments of the entire show. All of the shows was the end of that one when I think was it Travis or Eric? I can't remember. Looks at the guys the guys that brought the telescopes and says something like, "I bet you didn't think something like that would happen when you came out." Like,
yeah,
nope, we sure didn't.
yep, yeah. The I want to say it was Chuck and his telescope that has the database
Right.
that's not connected to any outside source, and things were literally removing as they're holding it in their hand and watching it, things being deleted from the database real time, or at least maybe the device thinking it's been deleted, or maybe it was just hidden. We don't know, but because when they returned to Salt Lake and started diving into it, all those deleted or missing pieces of data inside that device had come back.
Just crazy. What did I say? That can't happen, but it just happened.
Yep, exactly. And yeah, and that just comes back to the rocket with, you look at the timeline of this stuff too, is yeah, we hadn't been back to that spot. Um, looking for that signal, and yet that was the first spot on the ranch where we found the 1.6.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you and we've been looking, for it all this time, and with Eric's cracking now, and we're able to do a little bit more direction finding. And yeah, I know that I don't know if they're going to show it, but it was another experiment in regards to 1.6, and it involves the helicopter. And if they show some of what happened there, it's really going to be interesting, because I do think it happened after the rocket. Um, and that's going to be cool if they show that one too. So
Well, I have just been blown away so many times by what has transpired during this particular season. Um, Particularly during that cone zone episode. I mean, I prior to this, I have never actually physically jumped off the couch. And
yeah,
as my wife can attest, I did that during that episode, and I'm still trying to reconcile what I saw with accepting that it really happened. And I know that it did because I know the nature of the show, and I know the integrity of all of you involved in the experiment, that what was portrayed really was what the data showed in those LiDAR returns. And what said it to what for me, what drove that episode home was the look on Pete Kelsey's face.
oh
Now,
yeah,
you know
oh yeah,
Pete well. I got to spend a little time with Pete last year at Phenomicon. And even if you don't know Pete, just looking at the expression on his face, here is a man who is, one of the foremost experts in the world, I would say anyway. Now, again, I'm not an expert myself, but that's how much faith I have in what Pete does. And clearly a lot of other people outside of Skinwalker Ranch have faith in his knowledge
yeah,
as well. But he had this look of absolute astonishment of like you've been saying, John, this isn't possible. This can't happen, but yet it just did. And something like LiDAR, unless there's some technology out there that can spoof it, which again, now we're getting into territory of who can do that.
yeah,
But still, I mean, there's been so many moments like that this season. The cone zone, this rocket experiment, the dire wolf possibility, which we know is still kind of unresolved right now.
yeah,
But still, all of these things, this is undeniably, in my opinion, the absolute best season from the standpoint of a spectator like me, who's just really fascinated by what goes on at the ranch. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, my jaw is
yeah.
still on the floor from some of these things.
Well, and that's what I
Jaw on
know
the
you.
floor.
Yeah, and I know you two being insiders, you've been hearing us talk about this for the last year, and even at Phenomicon, and the things like, I know you guys all watched us walk in there, and we're all sitting there going, if you guys knew what was going on right now.
There was one chips and salsa last year.
Yeah,
You guys came in looking pretty darn frazzled, and we're all wondering,
Yes,
what
I
in the
remember
hell did
that.
they just go
yeah.
through?
And I want to say we said something along those lines, like, just remember this moment,
Yep, you did. You
Yep.
absolutely
right?
said.
And I want to say it is in regards to what has still not been shown yet.
Oh boy. Wow.
So, and again, it's when you look at some of the stuff, and this is what's really cool too, is I'll see, well, I there's one piece of information, um, and I want to say it was around the time that William Henry came out and showed us something. Eric has a very interesting story in regards to what was shown to us, and it's so crazy. Like, if they show what the conversation with William Henry, and we're doing a live, you guys got to remind us. I'll probably remember it too, but Eric found something in the interim between just a couple months ago. And it was just one of those things, like, just the chances of it. It's again, it's like the cow thing. So yeah, yeah, there's so many pieces to this, and and yes, I know prior we were kind of going to stay away from this, but that's one of the reasons why I'm writing what I'm writing
Yeah.
is all the just the pieces of a puzzle, if you will, or that along this timeline. And I don't even think a timeline is actually accurate term for what was happening. Um, but that's yeah, that's what's just trying to wrap our heads around all this stuff is
Well, let me ask you this. The last time Roger and I had you on, we talked about this one particular word that you were really focusing on at the time, and that word is validation.
yep,
Is that word still factoring in heavily to your experiences that
yes.
you're still experiencing at the ranch, even to the present day?
Oh yeah. Yeah, like season 5 was the season of validation for me. Yeah,
Wow.
because and you guys being insiders, I'm sure you've read what I've posted in my one section about all these experiences, and that's what's been really cool for me is I've been posting these in regards to what's being shown,
Right.
and there's still more. And that's where because some of it is in regards to stuff that's happened in the previous seasons. And what's really cool is some of them I have the photos on my phone from things that have happened in relation to some of those experiments and stuff. So for instance, like um, one of the times you people know my phone's freaked out and that there's been some issues with things, and I've shared some photographs before about what's happened on my phone. But when you look at the timeline in regards to some of that, it lines and occurred when we had some of these big crazy things happen with experiments. And it was either a day or two later or a day or two before. And so it's like one of those questions is, are we seeing some kind of residual or some kind of, like Eric says, fingerprint
Right.
of the of what's going on out here, and it's affecting cellular devices, which we know that these magnetic fields that they are, because Eric can replicate that with his really powerful magnet that literally will crush your hand if you get it between it and any piece of metal.
Yeah. It's like a neodymium magnet or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's like that big
Yeah,
and
Yeah,
very
I've seen
dangerous.
them.
like
Very, very dangerous.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
when it's in its case, you can sit there and move big heavy metal doors with it without touching the door. It's nuts.
Yeah.
So he can, and we've shared this before, in some areas where we go up to talk on the mesa about an experience that I had, and right as we start talking about a specific part, in relation to the visuals or the optical um, piece of what we were talking about, the phone starts doing this thing where it won't focus on anything. It won't focus on the far field, or it won't focus on me, which I'm in the near field. It's sitting here doing this weird optical thing.
Yeah.
And as we're talking, he's like, and he's showing me this is going on. I was like, and he's like, I know how to replicate that. I'm like, I know you do, Eric. I've seen you do it a bunch. So we walked right back down to the command center, and he gets his one magnet and moves it around a phone and it does the exact same thing that we were witnessing up on the mesa. But what's up on the mesa that could do that?
Yeah.
And that's again really what's crazy. Is it these magnetic fields, or is it crossing over into the microwave fields? I don't know. That's outside my wheelhouse, that's for sure. I'm learning a lot out there from Eric and Travis about this stuff, but it's still, there's still things that are hard for me to understand at that point. But I guess that's where all I know is what I have seen, and or I guess maybe a clarifying statement is what I think I've seen, because who knows.
Yeah.
Um, but it's definitely real. I've seen things and had things happen and seen others, and just the amount of people witnessing this too, and the video record that we're collecting. So
I've
No,
kind
that's
of said for, oh, sorry, didn't mean to
no, go
jump.
ahead, John,
I
by
was,
all means.
I've been thinking for like the last couple of seasons, you guys need sensors, magnetic sensors all across that field. That if magnetic north deviates by more than like 5 degrees, alarms just start blaring.
yeah, right.
Something's
Well,
about to go down.
yeah, well, and that's Eric's light guard and the
Yeah.
things that he would like to instrument the ranch out in that grid like that and see what happens.
Mhm.
And that's where he kind of got that a little bit years ago with the cattle tag GPSs that he set out.
Right. So that's a great idea.
And he's got that. I don't know if they've ever shown this or not, but I think he's shown it to some of the insiders. He's got all that data put into one of his blender models,
Yep.
and you see the deviation. And we know that there's a standard deviation with GPS and depending on what system it is, that it's going to move relative to its location within an error point, right?
Right.
But what you see with this GPS and some of it is it's sitting in its location, then it goes off a mile and a half, it comes back, and you're seeing
Underground.
the underground. You're some of it's going into the mesa. It's and he's got this whole collection. And I remember when he went out and hammered those things in, and a lot of them are in the same location. He still put them. Um, and he just sat there and literally watched those things for a year, or just let him collect data for a year, and he collected it all and he put it all in the model and just watched and found all that really interesting information. And that's what led him to thinking more about GPS and bring it and trying to do more with the GPS systems.
Yeah,
So,
it's been fascinating just to watch the whole investigation just progress and evolve as it
yeah,
has since season one. I mean, I was already a big fan of Skinwalker Ranch, going clear back to when the Hunt for the Skinwalker book came out, long before there was any notion of a docuseries. And
yeah,
John and I have talked before about what our first impressions were when we heard that there was going to be a docuseries about Skinwalker Ranch. I'm like, oh gosh, they're going to mess this up royally. It's going to end up being like Ghost Adventures or something like
Yep.
that.
yeah,
That's, all play into the camera,
Yep.
breaking that
yeah,
fourth wall of, oh,
It's gonna be all
yeah,
scripted. They're doing it for the money, cashing
yeah.
in on the name, all that kind of. I thought all of that stuff.
Stuff we still hear today.
and
Yep.
and we're happy to, obviously we know that didn't happen because the
Yeah.
docuseries is truly groundbreaking, in the sense that it is unscripted, and the extraordinary things that are documented as the seasons have progressed is really phenomenal. No pun intended, but it's truly the frontier of science. And in
Yep.
particular, I mean, I keep going back to this Cone Zone episode, and we'll wrap this up here pretty soon because it's getting late. But look at the implications of what if those measurements were truly accurate and you're able to get more repeatable data on that. That means that
Yeah.
this is the first time anybody that we know of has seen,
Oh,
something like this. And that's historical. That is
well,
monumental.
so you remind me something. So we've used that SLAM scanner or the terrestrial land scanner that Pete has brought out. He's brought that out multiple times over the last couple of years.
Mhm.
And that's not the first time we've gotten some interesting information from it. If you remember, we during the drone swarm from season 4,
Right.
that that I was the one running out there and pushing the button on that thing
Mhm.
right before the drones all lifted up, because we wanted that going before the drones went into the air. And we see that information in the mesa that's pushed off, right?
Mhm.
And that was the first time Pete, I believe, has seen anything with that terrestrial scanner having issues like that. And again, and this is what's really cool with Pete is his relationships with the manufacturer and other guys that he's like, oh, these guys are so far beyond my knowledge base. Like they're way better and know way more about this than I do, which I think he's being a little too humble in that, but that's fine. And none of them have seen anything like that,
Yeah.
right? And then yeah, we see this cone, and oh my gosh, and that's where it's like when you start seeing that with some of this upcoming stuff too, it's really going to be cool. And then the amount of times I've used that slam scanner last year during some of these experiments, and the amount of scans I did and things like that, like because the thought was being, I was like I was happy to do it because I wanted to get as many scans during these experiments as I could for Eric. And that's what my big goal was. I was like, I don't care if I'm on the camera or anything like that. I just want to get as much data for Eric and while all this stuff's going on, because like you guys saw, we get this big donut shape underground from the scan, and it matches with all the other stuff that we were seeing
Yeah.
in some of these other scans. And that right there was like that was really cool. Because and this is the other point of this is I think barring Travis, um, just because of his knowledge base with and his experience with NASA and some of these other things, um, or some of these other involvements that he's had, um, not one of us really cared about the UFO topic. And most of us are still like, oh, it's not my passion. That's not the thing that I'm really like. I don't want to go out there and prove that there's aliens or anything.
Right.
My big concern is security and the safety of the people on the ranch, and providing a good service to Brandon in regards to law enforcement and that realm. That's still my primary focus. But obviously, yes, I'm a part of the endeavor, and I'm happy to be and excited to be. But again, it's like me and Eric and Tom, and this isn't our this was never our like main focus, or our main passion, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny you brought that up because we kind of had that conversation earlier this week. Like, thank goodness we weren't like, what would we have like if you had a group like that out here, what would the show be like? Like
Right.
wanting something to happen so bad, like they start sacrificing that and start doing exactly what you just mentioned, like going out, having someone go stand over there and shake something, or like what would a group like that come up with
Yeah.
just to just because they want something to happen so bad, kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's kind of they have the best intentions kind of thing, but that's how they start getting in trouble. That's how they start going down roads that they shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once you cross that line and start to fabricate something just for the sake of making something
Yeah.
entertaining or exciting, you've lost all credibility.
Yep.
You have just
100%.
shot yourself in the foot and erased all of the legitimate hard work and investigation that you've done prior to that. And that
And
is one
that's
of the things that sets the secret of Skinwalker Ranch apart, is because none of you involved in this particular endeavor are like that. And that's, if there was one thing I could change about the perception that all the naysayers have about the work that you guys are doing out there, it's that this is not some smoke and mirrors, deception. We're just doing this to get ratings and to prolong the season. This is a process. This is a scientific investigation that is a deliberate process, and that process takes time. And you've got to be able to constantly check and recheck and strive for those repeatable results. And it's one of the things that absolutely places the secret of Skinwalker Ranch legions above any other
Mhm.
show that's out there. There is no other show, particularly in these fields, that is like the secret of Skinwalker Ranch. There's
Yeah.
nobody out there that does it. And again, you guys are pioneers in that regard, as far as, for want of
And
a better word.
yeah, and that's one of those things too, is like, um, we, I've seen that. Like we've brought some individuals out that are so passionate about stuff, and come to find out they weren't exactly um, truthful and or accurate in how they were trying to present things.
Right.
And it's kind of one of those things that we've seen in with some of that, and that's why we're so, well, especially Eric and Travis, peculiar about who they bring out, because it is focusing on the scientific investigation side of this. So there's always, and I'm sure you guys have seen this in some of our lives and stuff, where we always get the questions, or people, and I get this, is there's people coming in later, they're finding the show later, they haven't been a part of all the conversations, they don't know,
Yeah.
but they've heard of these other individuals who have been in the field, um, and they're big fans of certain individuals who are claiming all these things, and yet, and they're always asking, well, why don't you bring this person out, or why don't you bring this person out, or have you talked to this person? And it's like, and we're kind of at that point where we're kind of like, I was kind of sick of hearing that, and that's what I've said before, is like, why I have Eric and Travis, why do I need those people?
Right.
And it's like, the we're just trying to do it in such a way that it stands by itself, kind of thing, right?
Right.
um
And
and
you want it to stand on its own merit, which
yeah,
I think it does, because the phenomena that happens out there at the ranch is extraordinary and interesting enough. You don't have to,
yeah.
and this,
And well, and that's the other point, is like, I kind of chuckle when it, like, about the naysayer thing. I'm like, it, and I guess I'll put it this way: is I had this experience with a with one of the nurses, um, when I doing my law enforcement stuff, and we have to go into the hospital at times, or take people there, and if that particular nurse is working, a lot of times, if it's not busy, and it's more relaxed setting, she's the one that always has to bring up the ranch, and has to tell me that it's all BS,
Mhm.
and jokingly tells me that it's like we're just out there making stuff up. And yeah, at times I'm like, okay, like, enough is enough,
Mhm.
right? But then, but that's where I had to stop the kind of thing. I was like, it's that kind of person that it doesn't matter what you show them, it doesn't matter what you tell them, it doesn't matter what evidence you provide. It will they can't fathom, or their thought processes can't understand
Right.
anything outside this little
Little,
world that
little
they've set
box. Yep.
this little world that they've set themselves in. And if anything outside of that, uh, that could shatter that, like, they can't handle it.
Right.
I got
and
to,
and oh,
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was
Oh,
just gonna say, I wanted to say that that was one of the things that I thought, we already mentioned when we first heard about the show, Jim and I both were skeptical about it, but then I have to say, when I joined the Insiders program and started, seeing the chips and salsas and the episode recaps and getting to do chats with you guys and interact online, you know, I think it became immediately clear to me that you're men of integrity, it without a doubt. And so then it does kind of irritate me to hear the naysayers, but I understand it. They see bits and pieces on the TV
Yeah.
show. They have legitimate questions that have real answers. They just never bother to ask
Yeah.
good questions. But when people question your integrity, I mean, like, come on. Once we
Well,
start to
and
know you guys, you're not going to make stuff up. You're just not.
no. Oh, and honestly, and another part of that is we have had some things that we did get wrong, and we came out and we're like, yeah, we got it wrong.
Yeah.
Yep.
and
Absolutely.
and, and that was also because part of that was the process. If you understand the
Mhm.
process of how some of this is happening, And this was one of those things on behind the scenes kind of thing where there were some conversations about this because we weren't given the time or we weren't given the actual like the video files and stuff so we
Right.
could actually go through and
Mhm.
do that work.
Yeah.
And
And you
and
guys
and,
have always come clean on it. And that's another thing that, as John was saying, just illustrates what kind of people you guys really are, because that's also part of the scientific process is trial and error. And sometimes you get it wrong. And
Yep.
so
and I
what,
really loved how that was explained the one day was
yeah,
I never knew this process on like say big research papers and stuff. They're given like years
yeah,
to take the time and go through and do all these steps and reconfirm, or if something goes wrong, they go, okay, what went wrong? And they kind of perfect that process, if you will. And they're given years before they're ever coming out with anything.
right.
We're filming stuff, and 8 months later, it's coming out whether or not we're ready or not.
Yeah.
And and that's also the other thing is, um, in relation to this stuff, at the end of the day, when people like, there's going to be a time, I'm sure, where all these video records at some point are all released, or someone gets their hand on them
Hmm.
years down the road and goes through everything. And they are gonna, it's gonna be interesting when that happens. I'll- but
I still want to see an uncensored episode, just
right,
Travis alone.
oh, all of
Without all
us,
the Travis bleeps.
yeah. But what is gonna blow people away is the phenomena, and it is real,
Yeah.
and the stuff that isn't shown because someone goes, no one's going to believe that, and they don't put it in.
Well, it's part of the burden, for want of a better word, of being an experiencer, right? When
Yeah.
you experience something, whether it's something of this nature or, let's put it in a different context entirely, going to a rock concert. Try explaining to somebody what it's like to see your favorite artist on stage. Unless they were actually there in person experiencing that, then all they have to go by is whatever account you give them and the emotion that you put behind your words. And so it is, I think, with stuff like this, because I've had experiences, you've had experiences, I think all three of us probably had. And I don't need anybody else to believe me when I tell them that I've had an experience, because I
Hmm.
know what I saw. I know what I felt. I know what I experienced in that moment.
Yeah.
And you can argue somebody till you're blue in the face. And there are some people that, just because of the way they are, or whatever moment in time you catch them at, they're just not receptive to it. They're just not,
Hmm.
they can't take it. And I imagine that's something that you deal with a lot as well, pertaining to all of this, and probably the whole team does. So I can certainly relate on that level anyway.
And this, so I saw this interview, or a section of this interview, right, of a gentleman from the 60s and 70s time frame. And it makes me think, um, because if you ask anyone on the team, yes, we there is something going on. And depending on who it is on the team, is that you're going to obviously have different levels of belief in what it is and things like that. But at the end of the day, we all believe and have witnessed and seen things that we cannot explain out there. And we've all had some different experiences. And this individual in this, I can't remember his name, but he's essentially talking about, I want to say it's Watergate with the Nixon stuff.
Right.
And he was like, I was never a believer in Christ or anything like that. But when I sat there and watched this group of men who were involved with this, and they were some of the most powerful political people in the world, and they all caved within 2 weeks and changed stories and started caving into the pressure and started actually telling the truth. He's like, said something to me, because go back and you look at the apostles, and all of those men never changed their stories for their entire lives, and every single one of them was beaten and killed in brutal ways, and all this stuff, and they never once went back. And I'm not saying that we're at that level, you know, but every single one of us, we've seen stuff out here, and have experienced something out here.
Right.
And that's not going to change. And then on top of that, all the camera crew, all the other people that have been out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's some of our favorite conversations too, is when these camera, or these people who've been in the film industry, not just the camera guys, but the sound guys, the PAs,
Mm-hmm.
even the producers, all these guys have been around, and a lot of them have been on these other shows that, yeah, they're making stuff up. And so when they get hired on, they've said this to us later when they've been out there for at least a month. They're like, I thought this was going to be just another ghost hunting show, or, something that people are making a bigger deal out of than what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they're wrong. And they're like, I was wrong. This is crazy. This is some of the craziest stuff I've ever seen. And I know we always get the, why don't we break the fourth wall? Well, that's that company's decision. But their equipment goes down. They have issues. We've documented some of it on our side. Like our one sound guy, I've got a video of it, where he's showing us his receiver. And I'm sure you probably understand. You understand this way better than I do, Jim. You being a sound guy,
Right.
but he has his little receiver where has all the frequencies and all the channels on his mics, right?
Right.
Everything was pegged out. He could not attach any mics to anything, because essentially all the frequencies were being taken up by something.
Wow.
Or he was like being jammed by something, is what
he was being
said.
throttled by something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For minutes.
Wow.
And we have videos of that. And he's explaining that. And he's like, in over 20 plus years of doing this, and I can tell you, he's been on some big shows. He's been around the block, very well known in that world. He's never seen anything like that. So much so that he actually came and grabbed us and showed us that.
Wow.
Validation. That's a mini validation, right?
Yeah, right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, Kaleb, thank you so much this has been an extraordinary conversation. Wow, so many great things we've talked about, and thank you for taking time out of your Friday night, and please pass along our thanks to Stephanie, and
Yeah.
wish her and your family well for us. And closing thoughts, John, any closing thoughts or remarks from you before we wrap up?
No, thanks again for inviting me. And Kaleb, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming and hanging with us. And this has been a fantastic conversation. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in person in a couple months.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I'm excited. Phenomenon is going to be a good time, as it always is.
It's going to be great.
Right on. And again, we also want to extend our best wishes to Roger Stokes for a speedy recovery. We definitely missed you tonight, Roger, but we know you'll be back on the saddle with us pretty soon here. And so again, folks, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch can be seen every week on the History Channel. And we got, like Kaleb said, about 5 more episodes for this current season. And some of the most extraordinary stuff yet is coming up in some of these episodes. So much to look forward to. So much has already transpired. Like I said, jaw, floor.
Yeah,
Floor.
right.
And Travis Taylor, I remember this one thing, Kaleb, going back to, I think it was the second or third year of Phenomenon, when Travis Taylor first used the phrase, your reality is going to be broken. And that didn't really truly happen for me until this season. And boy, did it hit me hard.
Oh yeah, again, just wait.
Cone Zone messed me up too. I'll just say
Yeah.
that. that episode messed me up.
Yep.
I'm right
Yeah.
with you.
Absolutely. So again, folks, thanks for watching this episode of the Soul of the Unexplained. And if you like the content that you saw in this particular episode, then hit that subscribe button down there somewhere to be notified every time Roger and I post new content. And also make sure, folks, to check out the J Free 906 podcast with our friend Jeff Freeman, who recently had a fantastic conversation with Kaleb this past week, and we'll put the link to that in our description here as well. So make sure you check that out. And so with that, Kaleb, again, thank you so much for
Yep.
joining us. It was always a pleasure. We can't wait to get you on the flip side, maybe later on in the fall or toward
Yep.
toward the end of the year to kind of recap everything. But
Yeah.
we certainly wish you well, and please pass along our best regards to Eric and Travis,
Mhm.
Dragon and Thomas, and Jim Royston and Sam DeRiso as well. And yeah, like John said, we can't wait to see you at Phenomicon.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Always a good time.
Right on. Alrighty, folks. See ya.